Today we start by discussing a disengagement from the dream state. Our intellect was created a new world that dominates nature and has populated with monstrous machines. Today we're going to explore exactly what these types of symbols, myths, monsters, and gods in the psyche are. So I hope you stick with us today, here on Circle Theory. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed today, please like, subscribe, share, comment, anything. It helps a lot to be motivated to keep going. You can follow us on Twitter, all that's below. But let's hop in. Right, what we're talking about are these symbols that we create and assign a meaning to, and what these monstrous gods and beings are created from the unconscious. You can say modern man does not understand how much his irrationalism, which by the way has destroyed his capacity to respond to numerous symbols and ideas, has put him at the mercy of his psychic underworld. He has freed himself from superstition, or so he believes, but in the process he has lost his spiritual values to a positively dangerous degree. His moral and spiritual tradition has disintegrated, and he is now paying the price for this breakup in worldwide disorientation and disassociation. This plays up some of the ideas we recently talked about in our video on dreams and what those are, but the idea here is that we have now become severely disconnected, that we are now removed from the garden. We talk about this in our May video on why were the gods angry, right? That we have separated ourselves. And this is not, while this has relieved us of some primitive superstitions, we still have plenty. We still have instinctual behaviors and acts, but now we are less aware of them and less practiced in them. We no longer ascribe ritual to these practices, or at least this is what I take from Jung's reading here. So we continue and they say, there we fool ourselves that they lead an existence among the relics of our past. Our present lives are dominated by the goddess Reason, who is our greatest and most tragic illusion. By the aid of reason, so we assure ourselves, we have conquered nature. This would go great. So, Kant talks about like a critique of pure reason. That's some of what we're getting into here. This idea that our pure reason abilities, that just pure force of conscious thought is not enough to understand the universe. This is an important concept to any psychology besides maybe behaviorism, which isn't always my favorite. But the idea that internally, there is a part of us that we can't understand by pure sorting. There is a part of us that is ethereal, right? That is insanely complex. And that we're gonna have to take some leaps to get there. And that by following with pure reason, we can only get so far. I think a good example of this is when you take a test or when you're talking to a crush or something like that, and everything in reason, right? Everything you've worked out explains that the answer is this. He doesn't like me back, or this is the answer, but your gut says, go for it. Pick answer C instead. Ask him out, right? That thing. And that instinctual nature is of value. This is, we call it trusting your gut. Listening to the unconscious, because it often knows more than we do. So the Jungians continue to say, Christians often ask why God does not speak to them, as he is believed to have done in former days. When I hear such questions, it always makes me think of the rabbi who was asked how it could be that God often showed himself to people in the olden days, while nowadays nobody ever sees him. The rabbi replied, nowadays there is no longer anybody who can bow low enough. This answer hits the nail on the head. We are so captivated by and entangled in our subjective consciousness that we have forgotten the age-old fact that God speaks chiefly through dreams and visions. So the idea here is that any of that deeply meaningful stuff speaks through art. It speaks through those internal images that we've been talking about. It ascribes meaning through them. And that we have become so far removed from that dreaming and conscious state that we can no longer hear it. This is how we have become lost. This is how we become removed. That we become too disconnected. And we have to learn to re-listen to them, to find it. What a neat quest. And so they continue. Christ's crucifixion on Good Friday seems at first sight to belong to the same pattern of fertility symbolism that one finds in the rituals of such other saviors as Osiris, Tamu, Orpheus, and Balder. They too were often of divine or semi-divine birth. They flourished, were killed, and reborn. They belonged to a cyclical religious process in which death and rebirth play out. This is how we talk about in our Dead God video with Campbell, right? And circle theory is really into this idea that one thing that is clear in our idea of symbols, gods, processes, monsters, they all play out a pattern that our internal instincts do as well, that they go through, again, back to the monomyth, right? A process of birth, death, and rebirth in which we become anew. This is the process of how symbols come to be as well. This is the process of how they come to die and change. It's the process of how our psyche develops as well. They continue, these godlike figures are in fact symbolic representatives of the whole psyche, the larger and more comprehensive identity that supplies the strength that the personal ego lacks. Their special roles suggest the essential function of the heroic myth is the development of the individual ego consciousness, as Campbell might call him the chosen one, his awareness of his own strengths and weaknesses, in a manner that will equip him to handle the arduous tasks with which life confronts him. So for you, the superego is the god, right? It is the part that guides us. It is the mythological heroes that we can understand through various stories and tales. There's a reason why you see the same themes in a lot of these. This is where we come in the first few. We talk about what is justice. We understand it through the symbol. For me, when I think of justice, I think of Atticus Finch, and injustice actually, but as well, regardless. This is where we host these in our minds, that part of us is developed through death and rebirth and coming to help us interact with the world. And so I had a friend in clinical practice for a while who'd always say something very neat I found, which was he would suggest that when a client is really struggling and everything they're doing is not working, they needed to fire their gods and get new ones. What he meant was they needed to change their symbolic heroes. So the question is, who are yours? And are they helping and working? I hope to catch you next time. Like always, if you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Twitter. Catch you next time on Circles Theory. Just to flex on them, we ain't really got it like ya. I'm the type of motherfucker that'll check the check, do the math,